Your 72-year-old father drives to the pharmacy he has visited for a decade and calls you lost 3 blocks away. Your mother, who once remembered every birthday in the family, can't finish a sentence without losing the thought. And your neighbor, sharp as a tack 2 years ago, suddenly can't make change for a $10 bill. None of them complained. None of them asked for help, because none of them knew something was wrong. Here's the truth most doctors don't say out loud. By age 65, the brain and body are already changing in ways that look completely normal from the outside, until the moment they aren't. Scientists now confirm that the warning signs appear years before a diagnosis, but families miss them every single time. In this video, we're going through the 12 silent signs that aging is accelerating. Signs hiding in plain sight, in everyday moments. Signs that most people write off as just getting older. Some of these will surprise you, but number 4? That one changes how you'll look at someone you love forever. Let's start. We start at number 12, and this one hides in plain sight. It starts quietly. The golf clubs gather dust. The garden goes untended. She stops calling her friends. He skips his weekly poker game, once, then twice, then permanently. Families assume it's grief, or fatigue, or just slowing down. But Johns Hopkins researchers found that withdrawal from meaningful activities is one of the earliest measurable signs of cognitive decline, appearing up to 3 years before any memory problem becomes obvious. The brain's energy budget is tightening. Activities that once felt effortless, following conversations, remembering rules, processing fast-moving social situations, now cost more than the brain can comfortably afford. So the brain quietly steers the person away from the demand. The senior doesn't feel sick. They just feel like staying home. What to watch for? A pattern of gradually shrinking engagement. Not a bad week, but a consistent, months-long retreat from the things that used to matter most. Down to number 11, and it's happening at every single meal. Food stops being interesting, portions shrink, meals get skipped. Here's what's really happening. By age 70, up to 75% of adults experience significant decline in their sense of smell. And since smell drives 80% of what we actually taste, food genuinely loses its appeal. On top of that, the stomach empties more slowly, making seniors feel full far too soon. The result? Quiet, invisible malnutrition. And malnutrition accelerates everything. Muscle loss, immune failure, cognitive decline, fall risk. Most families don't notice until the weight loss is dramatic. By then, the damage is already months deep. What to watch for? Consistently unfinished meals, vague explanations like, "I'm just not hungry." Watch also for unexplained weight loss over several months. A quiet signal that the body has already been running on empty far longer than anyone realized. Number 10. This one plays out in the dark, literally. Falling asleep at 5:30 p.m. Awake and restless at 2 a.m. Disoriented in the morning, alert at midnight. Napping for 3 hours in the afternoon, then wondering why they can't sleep at night. This isn't just bad sleep, it's circadian rhythm dysregulation, and it's a serious neurological warning sign that most families mistake for normal aging. The brain's internal clock is controlled by a region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which loses neurons with age and becomes less sensitive to light. Melatonin production drops and shifts timing. The sleep-wake cycle slowly comes unmoored. A UC Berkeley study found that seniors with disrupted circadian rhythms had significantly higher deposits of amyloid, the protein directly linked to Alzheimer's, in their brains, even before cognitive symptoms appeared. What to watch for? A sleep schedule that has dramatically shifted or fragmented over recent months. Combined with daytime confusion about whether it's morning or evening, that pattern is a signal worth taking seriously. One step down, number 9. And families almost always call it stubbornness. He always takes the same route to the store. She arranges the kitchen exactly the same way, every day. Move one object, change one routine, suggest one detour, and the reaction is disproportionate. Anxious, upset, sometimes angry. Families call it stubbornness. But neurologically, This rigidity is the brain clinging to familiar pathways because building new ones has become metabolically expensive. Cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt, shift plans, and tolerate disruption, lives in the frontal lobes. As those connections degrade, the brain defaults to rigid patterns, not out of preference, but out of necessity. Familiar feels safe. Change feels like a genuine threat. A 2020 study in neuropsychology linked reduced cognitive flexibility directly to shrinking gray matter in the frontal and parietal lobes. What to watch for? Disproportionate distress over minor changes in routine or environment. Not occasional preference, but genuine anxiety or agitation when the familiar is disrupted. Number 8, and this one can cause real, permanent damage before anyone notices. She pays the same electric bill twice. He sends money to a stranger who called on the phone. Credit card charges she can't explain. A donation to a charity he can't name. Financial decision-making is one of the most cognitively demanding tasks humans perform daily. It requires working memory, abstract reasoning, impulse control, and the ability to detect deception. Functions centered in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, the exact regions most vulnerable to early neurodegeneration. Researchers at the Rush Alzheimer's Disease Center found that measurable decline in financial literacy appeared up to 6 years before a formal Alzheimer's diagnosis. 6 years. The FBI estimates seniors lose over $3 billion annually to scams, not because they're naive, but because the aging brain becomes genuinely less equipped to recognize manipulation. That's not a character flaw, that's neuroscience. What to watch for: duplicate payments, unpaid bills, unusual generosity with strangers, or complete inability to explain recent financial decisions. We move to number 7, and this one is heartbreaking. She starts a sentence and stops, looks confused, says, "Never mind," and waves it off. He asks you to repeat yourself 3 times in 10 minutes. She laughs when others laugh, but it's clear she didn't follow the exchange. This is verbal processing decline, one of the most heartbreaking early signs of cognitive aging, because the person experiencing it knows something is wrong and is often quietly ashamed. Language processing draws on multiple brain regions simultaneously and depends heavily on white matter connections between them. When those connections deteriorate, the whole system slows. The words are there, the intent is there, but the real-time assembly breaks down. A study in brain and language found these subtle processing difficulties were detectable up to 8 years before an Alzheimer's diagnosis. Many seniors develop quiet coping strategies, nodding along, deflecting with humor, steering back to safe topics. But the cognitive effort of sustaining those strategies over time accelerates withdrawal and isolation, making a hidden problem even harder to see. What to watch for: frequent sentence trailing, repeated requests to repeat information, or unusual silence in conversations they once dominated. Halfway through, number 6, and it looks so much like preference that most families never question it. He used to love the family Christmas gathering. Now he disappears after 20 minutes. She refuses to go to her favorite restaurant anymore. Too loud. A grandfather who once thrived in a busy room now seems genuinely distressed by the same environment. This isn't introversion. It's sensory gating dysfunction, the brain's declining ability to filter irrelevant sensory input and focus only on what matters. In a healthy brain, the thalamus and prefrontal cortex work together to suppress background noise and competing stimuli. As these regions age, the filtering weakens. Everything comes in at once, with no hierarchy. The result is genuine overwhelm, sometimes genuine pain. A 2018 study in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience found that seniors with sensory processing difficulties had measurably reduced gray matter in regions responsible for attention and emotional regulation, and significantly higher risk of anxiety, depression, and cognitive decline. This is not sensitivity. This is neurology. What to watch for: progressive avoidance of previously enjoyed social environments, or visible distress in settings that were once comfortable and familiar. Number 5, quietly dangerous, and happening in millions of homes right now. 7 prescriptions, 3 different times of day, some with food, some without. For a healthy brain, this is manageable. For an aging brain beginning to decline, it can quietly become an impossible system, and the consequences are life-threatening. Seniors miss doses, then double up. They take morning medications at night. They stop taking critical prescriptions entirely because the system is too confusing, and say nothing. A missed blood pressure pill can lead to stroke. An incorrect insulin dose can cause a dangerous crash. Some cardiac medications have such narrow windows that even small errors trigger emergencies. The American Geriatric Society identifies medication mismanagement as one of the leading causes of preventable hospitalizations in adults over 65. Not from carelessness, but from cognitive overload. The senior isn't being irresponsible. The system has simply exceeded what their brain can reliably manage. What to watch for: loose pills on counters, bottles refilled too early or too late, or a senior who can't clearly describe what they take or why. Number 4. This is the one that stops families cold. He drives to the grocery store he's visited every week for 30 years and can't find his way home. She walks around her own neighborhood and doesn't recognize her street. He calls you from a parking lot, frightened and confused, with no idea how he got there. Spatial disorientation in familiar environments is one of the most alarming signs of neurological decline, and it can appear with terrifying suddenness. The hippocampus contains the brain's GPS, place cells and grid cells that build and maintain internal maps of the world. The hippocampus is among the very first structures damaged by Alzheimer's. As those cells deteriorate, familiar places become genuinely unrecognizable, not metaphorically, but neurologically. A UCL study found hippocampal shrinkage sufficient to cause spatial disorientation could be detected on brain scans up to a decade before diagnosis. And here's what makes this especially dangerous. Outside of these episodes, the senior may seem completely normal. The spatial memory fails in isolation, while other functions remain intact, until they don't. What to watch for: even one episode of becoming lost or disoriented in a familiar environment. One episode. That's enough to report to a doctor immediately. Down to number 3. Most families chalk this one up to age until someone gets hurt. She used to be graceful. Now she bumps into door frames. She has unexplained bruises. From corners, from walls, from falls, she barely remembers. This isn't aging muscles. This is the motor system losing its feedback loop. Coordination and balance are controlled by the cerebellum and basal ganglia, which communicate constantly with the motor cortex to make continuous micro-corrections. When neurons in these structures degenerate, those corrections slow, and what was once automatic becomes unreliable. Falls are the leading cause of fatal injury in adults over 65, according to the CDC. But beyond falls, new clumsiness can signal early Parkinson's disease, cerebellar atrophy, or vascular dementia, conditions where early detection changes outcomes dramatically. Neurologists also watch gait closely: shortened stride, reduced arm swing, a slight forward lean. These changes can appear years before a diagnosis and serve as some of the most reliable early biomarkers of motor and cognitive decline. What to watch for: new, unexplained clumsiness that wasn't present a year ago, especially noticeable changes in how they walk. Number 2, and this one damages relationships before anyone understands why. He was patient his whole life. Now he snaps at the smallest thing. He was never suspicious of anyone. Now he believes family members are stealing from him. Families take this personally. They assume stress. They argue back. But this is not a personality problem. This is a brain problem. The frontal lobe governs personality, emotional regulation, empathy, and impulse control. As it loses neurons and white matter integrity, the person who once lived there changes, not by choice, but by biology. In frontotemporal dementia, personality change is often the first symptom, appearing years before any memory problems. A landmark study in JAMA Psychiatry found that significant personality shifts in adults over 65 predicted a dementia diagnosis within 3 to 5 years with strong statistical reliability. The person who is now irritable, cold, paranoid, or impulsive is not choosing to act this way. Their brain has changed. Their behavior is following. What to watch for: a persistent, months-long shift in temperament or emotional character. Not a bad stretch, but a fundamental change in who the person is. And number 1, the most dangerous sign on this entire list, because it lasts only seconds and everyone moves on. 30 seconds, maybe less. Then, he's back. Sorry, just distracted. And everyone moves on. This is the most missed warning sign on this entire list, and potentially the most dangerous. These brief episodes can be transient ischemic attacks, mini strokes where blood flow to part of the brain is temporarily interrupted. They can be silent seizures, far more common in older adults than most people realize. Or they can reflect rapidly progressing neurodegeneration, the brain losing its ability to maintain stable processing under any cognitive stress. A study published in Neurology found something alarming. Adults over 65 who reported even one episode of sudden unexplained confusion were 3 times more likely to suffer a major stroke within the next 12 months. 3 times from one episode. And yet families do nothing because it passed, because he seemed fine, because nobody wanted to make a big deal out of what felt like nothing. Please hear this. Any episode of sudden, unexplained confusion in a senior, even if it lasted seconds, deserves a medical evaluation, not next week, today. None of these 12 signs announce themselves. They don't come with an alarm or a diagnosis attached. They show up in ordinary moments, at the dinner table, in the car, during a phone call, disguised as quirks, moods, or just getting older. But they are not nothing. They are the body and brain asking, quietly, persistently, to be seen. You don't need to be a doctor to make a difference. You need to be present, to notice, to ask the uncomfortable question, to make the call. Because the families who act early, who bring these small, quiet signs to a doctor before a crisis, are the ones who give their loved ones more time, more dignity, more of the life they deserve. If something in this video struck a chord, share it with someone who needs to see it. Drop a comment with what you've noticed in yourself or someone you love. And subscribe, because on this channel, we talk about the things most people are too uncomfortable to say out loud. Thank you for watching.